Hello, everyone. This is the Joseph Ryder Anderson podcast. And today we're going to be taking a little bit of a break from talking about Union Arena to instead talk about the upcoming Pokemon TCG Journey Together set. It's coming out in just a few weeks. And pre-release season is also starting in just 2 days. So we're really getting into the thick of Journey Together. And it's going to be a really exciting set for a couple of reasons. For starters, it's the first main Pokemon set since the Gym Hero, Gym Challenge days, very early on, the beginning of the Pokemon TCG, to feature trainers Pokemon as not just artworks that have trainers in them alongside Pokemon, but actual trainers Pokemon with the name of the trainer in the Pokemon title. That makes them a separate and different kind of card altogether. So not only is that the reason why this set's going to be so popular, but also this set is definitely riding on the wave still. Set off, really starting with Surging Sparks was the set that really kicked off this renewed fervor for Pokemon trading card game. In reality, actually, 2024 in a lot of ways saw a bit of a cooling from what had been a pretty strong surge in interest for the Pokemon TCG. We had some pretty decent sets in 2024, but they weren't quite as popular until around the time Surging Sparks came out, especially with that Pikachu, that Stellar Terra Pikachu special illustration rare, that just drove people crazy. And that entire set is still super valuable. And it really prepped everyone for the craziness that was Prismatic Evolutions. I don't need to probably say much about that because anyone in the Pokemon hobby knows just how crazy that set is. You know, I went to a local game shop not too long ago, and a single pack of Prismatic Evolutions was going for almost $20, which is insane. It's incredible that a card like the Umbreon EX SIR could be worth $1,600. That's what it was at last time I checked. $1,600, a new card from a new pack worth that kind of money is just insane. And it's not like a one-of-a-kind card. There's plenty of those cards overall, but still quite rare. Pulling any single one of them is very, very hard to do, very rare. But overall, yeah, there's a decent number of these cards that to have that kind of price tag associated with it is pretty crazy. Anyways, all of that to say that there's just a lot of excitement in the Pokemon world, which is great. I think also Pokemon Pocket caused a bit of excitement to some renewed energy in like what the Pokemon trading card game can be. And all of that is helping drive a ton of interest for Journey Together. If you need any more signs of how excited people are for Journey Together, just look at the prices, the pre-order prices for some of these products. Back in 2024, pre-order prices were pretty low, right? Like the Shrouded Fable and Twilight Masquerade and those kinds of sets, they weren't going like for crazy high on the secondary card market. They weren't fetching more than normal prices. But now we go on TCG Player and take a look. Journey Together boxes, just a regular Journey Together Elite Trainer box, is on a pre-order price for $120. So that's incredible. People are definitely treating this like Prismatic Evolutions Part 2. People are just really hungry for Pokemon cards and Pokemon products right now. So on the one hand, that's a bummer because it makes it hard for people, just regular fans of the Pokemon TCG who follow every single set all the time. It makes it a little bit hard for them to find these products sometimes. On the other hand, I personally, as a fan of the Pokemon TCG, am always happy to see this kind of excitement because it just brings a lot of good things. It brings a lot of new players into the game. It brings a lot of interest and excitement around things. It can also make it kind of fun to go and try to find packs and products. That was one of the things that drew me into the hobby in the pandemic times, is just how much fun it was to hunt around at local stores just to try to find these products. So it's not, there's silver linings to everything, and there is no exception to this. Now, what we're going to be doing for this podcast is we're going to be doing the full set preview, essentially. I've given already a bit of an overview to the background behind this set there, but we're going to be diving into more specifics like the pre-release promos that have been released and going over each one of those ranked. We're going to be talking about the different decks to look out for in this set And we're going to be finishing with looking at talking about some of the chase cards that people are going to be most excited about getting from this set. And each one of these I've written about more on the site, josephryderanderson.com. So I will be linking to the article for each one of these topics so you can look at the decks, look at the cards, and get a little bit more info on what it is we're discussing. So there's a lot to go over there. I think what we're going to do, I think a good starting point, because this is going to be happening in just a couple of weeks, just in a couple of days, I think a good starting point will be to discuss what the Pokemon TCG pre-release promos are for Journey Together. I think that we had some killer pre-release formats last year. So if you're not familiar with what a Pokemon pre-release is, it's basically like a little party. You can kind of think of it as like a little party where people get together, open packs, open these pre-release kits. They get to build decks on the spot and battle each other with these custom decks. And actually the pre-release format has become, over time, has gotten to be one of my favorite ways to play the Pokemon TCG. It's just extremely exciting to not know what deck you're going to be playing with during that tournament, to show up and have the opportunity to create something very fun and take risks. There's a lot of risks involved in building a solid pre-release deck. Are you going to lean hard into the evolution packet that you get and build just sort of a standard pre-release deck the way you're supposed to, or are you going to go crazy and base your entire deck around one Pokemon EX that you pull and just really try to knock it out of the park? It's really exciting to face these challenges in a limited time frame and to just battle each other in a format that you otherwise would just never play, right? It's a lot different than building the perfect deck, the perfect meta deck, and battling it out on the ladder on Pokemon TCG Live, or even taking a meta deck to a regional. It's a very unique format. And so we had a lot of really solid ones. Some of the best I've ever played were last year. Like Twilight Masquerade had some fantastic pre-release kits and promos. I think Surging Sparks was not great, but it was overall a great year for the pre-release format. And I will say that Journey Together looks like a really fantastic pre-release format, just given these promos. So with each of these promos usually comes like a set, like an evolution packet or a set of cards that kind of support these strategies, and you get like a mix and match of two of these. So you'll get one of the stamp promos, and then each promo you also will get the other in your pack. So you'll basically be getting two of these strategies, and it'll be random basically in your kit. But I did rank these from worst to best, and let's go over that ranking, starting with Lily's Ribombe. Actually, I don't know how you say that. I think it's Ribombe. But this card has the Inviting Wink ability. I think overall this is definitely the weakest card, partly because the Inviting Wink actually could be a solid ability in some decks, especially stall decks. The thing is, if you're playing the pre-release format, the odds that you're going to just somehow get a stall deck that works is probably not going to happen. So I put this card in last place. However, I do think this card could do okay in just a regular standard format where you are looking to fill up your opponent's bench with basic Pokemon they may not need, and then stall them out basically through switching in different characters and things like that. But I think in the pre-release format, I don't really see this card being super helpful unless if you somehow get paired with some crazy cards that play really well into the strategy. I think you'll probably, or may even want to skip this particular one. But good news, that's the only sort of dud in the pre-release promos. The rest are actually pretty decent. Moving on to number 3, which is Iono's Kilowattrel. And this is actually a decent Pokemon card. Flashing Draw has a really strong draw effect for a pre-release format where you get to discard a basic Lightning Energy from this Pokemon in order to use the ability, and the ability is you get to draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. That's some insane card draw, and it's only a stage 1 Pokemon, but some insane card draw for the pre-release format. I think the problem here is where are you going to get the energy, right? Where are you going to get an extra energy on the Kilowattrel that you can basically just burn? I think that odds are you probably aren't. I could see this working pretty well, perhaps if you somehow get this paired with the hop Snorlax that we're talking about a little bit, because there are some Pokemon in the hop lineup that can attack essentially for free, especially or for a low amount of energy. So like for example, if the pre-release kit comes with a hops Cramorant and you just need to attach 1 energy to get the attack off, and that Pokemon does do really well in pre-release because you start out with 4 prizes, which is one of the prerequisites for using that attack. But if you're using that kind of a deck, you could probably get away with this because you really just need to attach 1 energy, and then from then on to your Pokemon each time from then on you can just attach some lightning energies to Kilowatt Roll and then discard them to draw a bunch of cards. So actually Kilowatt Roll could be okay. I think the problem is just whether if you don't get into it with a deck, have this paired with a deck that has low energy costs, or even like a card like Hop's Choice Band that can just completely remove the energy altogether. These are all cards that are coming out in Journey Together, just in case you don't know. Hop's Choice Band is a really strong card that's coming out. We'll talk about that probably a little bit more when we talk about the decks. But I think that's the main problem. This works if you have a deck that just doesn't really need energy, but most of the times you're needing to be really effective with how you attach your manual energies in a pre-release format, because you don't tend to have a ton of energy acceleration in this kind of format. So I think it just really depends on what deck you get paired with, but overall Kilowatt Roll is probably not going to be a game changer or breaker, but still a very strong card for the pre-release format, which just goes to show you that a card that has this strong of a draw engine attached to it being number 3 means we have a pretty solid format this time around. Moving on to En's Darmanitan. So again, high risk, high reward card here. In some ways, this Darmanitan is crazy strong. We're particularly looking at the Flame Body Cannon here. I think Backdraft could be okay, depending on the circumstances, but really you're looking at Flame Body Cannon because this is a crazy strong attack for the pre-release format where you're essentially doing 90 damage to 2 Pokemon. So you get to do 90 damage to the Pokemon you're facing and then 90 damage to a Pokemon on the bench. That's very reminiscent of Moonlight Shuriken, and I think a lot of people are going to notice that, especially post-rotation, outside the pre-release format post-rotation, with Radiant Greninja rotating out, people are going to be looking for a replacement attack, and this certainly seems like it. We're going to talk about this some more within the context of En's Zoroark deck, and I think that this deck in that context, this card in that context is really, really strong. But in this pre-release format, it really is, again, just going to depend on what other cards you get. So it's hard to know because we don't know all the cards that come in a kit or what cards you're going to get from your boosters. But just right off the bat, this could be a really strong attack. The problem is that if you're going to spend your 3 turns manually attaching energy to this Darmanitan and then use Flame Body Cannon, that's really cool because you'll probably get 2 knockouts depending on what Pokemon your opponent's facing. But at the cost of discarding all energy from this Pokemon, meaning that you then have to go and manually charge up other Pokemon again. So that's a little bit of a tall order. If your kit comes with En's PP Up, that sounds funny on podcast, but that's a new card that's coming out. It's a PP, so En's PP Up. That's gonna let you accelerate energy from your discard to one of your end Pokemon. If that comes in your kit, then this card could be completely broken. It would probably be number 1 because that, being able to do 90 damage to 2 Pokemon in 1 turn in a pre-release format is just crazy. It really just depends on what cards you get and how much support you get. My guess is that you probably won't get like too many of those En's PP Ups. You might get like 1, which is probably still not enough quite to make this an overwhelmingly strong attacker. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see. As it is, it's definitely number 2, though, for the pre-release promos, and a very strong card. Number 1 is definitely Hop Snorlax. This card has all the hallmarks of just a dominant pre-release promo and attacker. It's got 150 HP, which means it's a very beefy basic for the pre-release format. It's going to be very hard to take this guy out for your opponent. It's got extra helpings, which boosts your Hops Pokemon by 30. So assuming you get some other Hops Pokemon, which you probably will, this guy's going to be so solid in the pre-release format, granting extra damage to each of your Pokemon. And then Dynamic Press itself does 140 damage plus 30 base, right? So it's doing 170 damage right off the bat, which is enough to knock out a lot of Pokemon that you're going to face in the pre-release format. So if you get Hop Snorlax, I think you're going to go a long ways towards having what you need to really dominate the pre-release format right off the bat. And the nice thing is that this Pokemon's a colorless, so colorless typing, so it can pair well with just about any other really solid pulls you get from your packs. So definitely the strongest. I'd be very happy if I got this Pokemon in my pre-release kit. So now, with all that being said, let's go ahead and instead of talking for a moment about the pre-release, let's go ahead and move on to talking about the decks themselves. You've kind of gotten a taste for some of what the decks are going to be, the new decks to this format. And so let's talk about some of the top ones to watch for. Again, starting from weakest to strongest, I put in last place, I put Iono's Belly Bolt EX. And that's not because it's a bad deck. There are some really strong things going for it here. In this particular deck, and I will again link to it in the show notes, the article, so you can check out this deck. But this deck is really looking to use the Iono Belly Bolt EX to accelerate energy, and then you're using the Kilowatt Roll that we talked about. You're discarding that lightning energy from the Kilowatt Roll to draw cards, and then using the Belly Bolt EX to attach energies from the discard. And a lot of people thought to use this to be paired with Raging Bolt EX, which makes sense, right? Because if you can accelerate energy every turn with Belly Bolt EX, then you can then remove that energy to boost Raging Bolt EX's Bellowing Thunder. The thing is you don't really end up needing to do that. The Raging Bolt EX engine that is already in existence with the Ogerpon EX, Terra Ogerpon EX, is actually stronger by quite a bit. So this is not probably going to end up being super popular on the competitive scene, but given how great that draw engine is with the Kilowatt Roll, I could definitely see this being a deck that you're going to come across on Pokemon TCG Live and things like that. It's definitely worth being semi-competitive. It's just not going to probably be the most competitive way to play Raging Bolt EX when there's already so many strong ways to play that deck. Moving on now to Salamence EX. So this is a really, really cool deck. It's one of the ones that I'm actually more excited to play with, to test out. And I think that it is really cool because the Salamence is just such a beast of a Pokemon. It's got 320 HP. It's Dragon type, obviously, so it doesn't technically have a weakness, although there is a Pokemon we'll talk about a little bit that kind of changes that in this set. It's got an attack, other than the 300 damage one, it's got an attack that does 50 damage to each bench Pokemon, which is kind of insane. So this guy is just a crazy strong attacker. I really like this particular deck I'm sharing in my article. I really like the inclusion of Grand Tree. I think that's really cool. I've used Grand Tree in my Hydro Apple EX deck to just have a more effective means to evolve my Pokemon. And then this particular deck is using the Blaziken EX as an energy accelerator onto the Salamence, which is a really cool strategy. It's been a while since we've had a 2-prize Blaziken attacker. So this Blaziken also doubles as a secondary attacker, which I think is solid, and it can get off a pretty strong attack for just 2 energy. I think where this deck is probably going to suffer is that it is a little bit tough to get that whole shebang going with Salamence. It's a little tough to get that really strong attack powered up. So that's going to probably make it a little less effective. And I think too, it's not quite hitting that 300 damage output's just not quite putting it in the threshold that it's going to necessarily knock out everything. Right now, there's plenty of Pokemon that can survive that. As we move forward into the 3-price Pokemon, that matter is going to get worse. So this deck probably isn't super proof from that perspective either. However, it just looks like a really cool deck, so I'm definitely going to try this one out and see if I can put together something pretty effective with it. I think another interesting thing too here is that you also have the Pidgeot EX line for consistency, for adding consistency. It seems like a lot of stage 2 decks like Salamence and Charizard EX and others tend to fit the Pidgeot EX in, since it's such a powerful card search engine. If you are already running the rare candy anyways, decks tend to want to try to tech that Pokemon in. Another deck that we have that I'm not going to talk too much about is the Mamoswine EX. It's kind of an interesting deck. I actually could see this deck being kind of good. It reminds me of some other decks from the Sword and Shield era that were similar in fighting types. But it's just a really straightforward, strong deck. I think it's cool that it has the Ogerpon, the Cornerstone Ogerpon EX, which is always a strong Pokemon because it can basically survive or at least prevents damage from getting attacked by Pokemon with an ability, and a lot of strong Pokemon have abilities, obviously. So that's a really effective attacker / blocker. Mamoswine itself is really effective. Can hit for a ton of damage with the right setup if you have enough stage 2s on your bench. But I think this deck just ultimately probably doesn't have what it needs to really succeed. But it is a strong deck. Again, one of those decks that people are going to probably pick up because it is relatively easy and straightforward to play. I could definitely see this deck being super popular on Pokemon TCG Live, but not really the strongest deck in the world. It's definitely is okay. It has what it needs to get the job done, which is why I put it up as high as I do. I just don't think it's going to be as insanely popular as some decks, and it probably won't be as strong, but definitely a solid mid-tier deck. Moving up to what was the start of the really much stronger decks, and that's Hops Zacian. And actually, there's a lot to say about this deck. I was just writing an article on it today, looking into it some more, doing some research. And this deck is actually from a deck that won a city tournament, a city league in Japan. So this deck is already being played in Japan. And this one I think is actually going to be super, super popular. It reminds me a lot of Lost Zone Box for some reason. Maybe that's just because it is a toolbox kind of deck. It also does have a Cramorant in it, and the Cramorant can, if it's equipped with Hop's Choice Band, it can attack for free. What I really like about this deck, though, is the potential it has to just insanely boost damage output. I think there's just a lot of fun ways that people could mess with this. And this deck already is a great example of that happening, where this deck's not even looking to use a Zacian EX's stronger attack. It's just running a bunch of darkness energies to basically power up the attacks of your Pokemon. They're colorless. The attacks are using are colorless anyways. They use colorless energy, so you can use any energy you want, and this just makes it more likely that you're going to find that darkness energy that you can then equip to your Monkey Dory, and then use Monkey Dory to spread damage around. This is mostly going to be done via your Snorlax's attack, which does do 80 damage to itself. But it's that the damage output that you can reach. It does 140 base, but then plus 30 from Snorlax's own ability, and then it's going to be doing plus another 30 if you can attach one of your choice bands, and then it's doing another 30 if you have your stadium in play. So that's just pretty insane that you can hit for that kind of damage. So you're talking 30, 60, 90, so 120 plus 140, so you're talking 260 from a basic Pokemon. That's just absolutely insane. Of course, you have to get a lot of things together for that to happen. Yeah, so there's that. Your Snorlax is going to be the main way that you do this. To move damage around with Monkey Dory. But of course, if you take hits or anything like that, you also can move damage around that way. So I just really like this deck. I think it can just be super powerful, especially against decks like Zacian EX's attack, when bolstered, can definitely do a ton of damage to decks that run lower HP Pokemon. And it just requires a lot of skilled play to make sure you're always taking the maximum number of knockouts possible. But I really, really like the way this deck is shaping up. It has some crazy strong support via like the choice band that gives you 30 damage more for Hop's characters. The Hop's bag that lets you bring your Pokemon to the bench. There's just a lot going for this deck. I think it'll be super fun and super popular when it comes out. Next up is probably going to be a deck that's going to be in the top tier is Ends Zoroark, and this is just a crazy deck. I love this deck. You have the Zoroark itself, which is just a crazy strong card. It can do any attack from your bench as long as that attack is from an Ends Pokemon. You can use an effect that's basically a buffed up version of Concealed Cards, where you can trade one card. That's the ability to trade one card to draw two more. It's just really strong. And then you also get some specific Ends Pokemon tools in here. One is the PP up, which I talked about, which is going to be just the source of endless jokes amongst people. It's kind of an unfortunate name there, but it is what it is. It accelerates energy from your discard onto one of your Pokemon. This is especially relevant. You're going to be mostly using that to accelerate energy onto, or pretty much only using that to go onto your Zoroark. But what's interesting about that is that it replaces the need to have Dark Patch. In this particular deck, Dark Patch lets you accelerate darkness energy onto your dark type Pokemon, and it was universally used in any dark type deck. So now this particular deck has access to something just as strong in the form of Ends PP up. So I think this deck is actually going to end up being, it's going to be super popular online, but I think it'll end up being one of the top decks. It's just really strong and very versatile. And again, you have access to that Darmanitan that we talked about in the pre-release format, but in this format, you don't need to bother with charging up your Darmanitan just to lose all of the energies you charged up. You can just go ahead and use that attack, that Flame Body attack, using your Zoroark's attack. So essentially, you get like this access to this toolbox range of attackers without having to actually charge them up individually. You can just use your Zoroark to get these attacks off. It's a lot like the Mew VMAX from back in the day, if you remember that. Where Mew VMAX had that attack that you could use your Genesect's attack basically as its own. And I think that attack lets you use any Pokemon on your bench. This is limited to just Ends Pokemon, but I think that makes sense because otherwise this would be pretty insanely broken. But as it is, being able to use any one of these Ends Pokemon attacks is still super strong. So I really love this deck. This is probably my number one deck I want to play personally. There's a bunch of decks. I keep saying that. Every one of these decks is so interesting. But this is probably the number one that I'm most interested in trying out for myself. And then moving on to what is most likely going to be the top deck. Not just coming out in this set, but probably the top deck, arguably the top deck in the format post-rotation. And that's the Terra box deck. I think it's been very interesting to see this deck evolve and take shape over time. Because it started out, this deck's definitely, this sort of way of playing this kind of a deck, definitely started with Terapagos back in Stellar Crown, where you got that Area Zero Underpass, and you could then field just a much bigger bench than you could before. And back then it was really like a Terapagos kind of thing, and a couple other Pokemon would get funneled into that. Whereas now it's like you have this just insane range of attackers that you can use. The most unique one, and why this makes the list for new decks, even though a lot of these cards have been here before, is that Lily's Clefairy EX. And this gives you, for the first time in Pokemon TCG, since the Sword and Shield era at least, this gives you a way to counter Dragon-type Pokemon. So even though Clefairy it is not a type that is, super effective essentially against Dragon types, Clefairy has an ability that turns Dragon-type Pokemon weakness into Psychic type. So you can just use Clefairy to pound through Dragon-type Pokemon, which is pretty exciting and a pretty big advantage. This Clefairy definitely evens the playing field and helps make this toolbox deck much more effective because of it. You also have the Wellspring Mask Obergropone EX, which also goes a long way in filling that void left by Greninja by being able to take 2 attacks in a turn. And yeah, you just have a really, really solid deck here in the form of Terra Box. The one that's in my article that I'm linking to is actually piloted by Tor Redcliffe in his run in the Champions League in Japan that he went to. And this deck got 11th. It was just such a strong and solid deck. So certainly check it out. Again, you also do have that consistency engine coming from the Noctowl that lets you take any 2 trainers from your deck. This deck is just, again, it's evolved to be a Terra toolbox deck. That's what it is today, and it's just really cool seeing it. I think toolbox decks tend to do really well in Pokemon because you have so much card search that it doesn't really matter if you have a lot of disparate cards. You can just use your card search to find what you need to find. It's kind of the completely opposite to these more tribal trainer-focused Pokemon decks that are going to be coming out. And I think both are fun. I think it's exciting when you have decks that are really tied to an archetype and then decks that are just kind of a sampling of your greatest attackers available to you. So I think both. It's fun when a meta has both of these kinds of decks in it. Now, so we've covered the decks, we've covered the pre-release. Let's talk about one more thing, and that is the most expensive cards in Journey Together. So, we have the player side of things, the collector side of things, and both are great. And I am myself a collector and a player. And it's always really exciting to see what cards are coming out and which ones are likely to do well. Number 1 on my list is the Clefairy special illustration rare. This was the most expensive card in the Japanese sister set, Battle Partners, and I think has a very good chance of being number 1. In my opinion, it'll either be this card or it'll be the Iono's Bellibolt EX that ends up being number 1 most valuable card. But you never really know. Things don't always go the same way in the United States as they do in Japan, but I do think that Clefairy EX is going to be such a central Pokemon for that Terra box that the competitive edge will drive it up in value, even though this is primarily going to be a collector card. People are still going to want to hunt down this card and put it in their decks and bling out their decks, so that's going to add some value, as well as a very popular trainer in the form of Lily, and also just fabulous artwork in general for this very unique and kind of historic card. It's the first time we've had a card that can apply weakness to dragon type, so I think it's going to be, in a while at least, so I think it's going to be a really just popular, really highly sought after card. And the artwork itself is decent. It's not anything crazy. It's not like pushing the edge of what Pokemon artwork is, but it's a very, very beautiful storybook-esque artwork featuring Clefairy and its trainer. Number 2 is that Bellibolt EX. We did talk about this a bit. I don't think this card is going to be super strong competitively, but Iono is pretty well known for being a very popular trainer, and any card with her on it tends to do well in a secondary card market. And I think people are just going to go absolutely nuts for this card, especially given the hype for Journey Together and Pokemon in general. I think that this is going to be probably the signature closing out card featuring Iono from a Pokemon TCG era that just heavily featured this popular streamer trainer. So I think this will be in some ways kind of an iconic end to that role. Next up is my personal favorite amongst these illustration cards, and that's Zoroark EX. This card is just super cool. I don't even really know what's going on in it. You just see these 2 guys facing off with each other against their opponent, and you just feel from the way that it's drawn that these 2, trainer and Pokemon, are really on the same team and about to try to pull off something really challenging together. So I think Zoroark is my favorite new mechanic, and Zoroark is my favorite new mechanic coming out in this set. And so this card is my personal favorite, and it's going to be obviously worth a ton with such an iconic trainer and such an iconic Pokemon and such an iconic card put together in this set. Is just going to this card is going to be worth a nice chunk of change. I think any one of these 3 could easily be the number 1 chase and defining chase of the set, and I think all 3 are going to certainly be worth a ton of money. Probably not quite Prismatic Evolution's money, but I think definitely Surging Sparks kind of money. So check out Surging Sparks. I'll link to my guide, Surging Sparks guide, market guide, so you can get an idea for what these cards are likely to be worth. Next up is a card that's actually aesthetically just as pleasing as those cards, but I think the fact it does not have a trainer in it is going to lower its value in comparison, and that's the Salamence EX Special Illustration Rare. Not really a whole lot to talk about here. It's just an epic looking card with the dragon flying in the mountains, as dragons often do, and a bunch of fire flying around. It's just a beautiful card, though. I think the colors of Salamence just work really well, and this card highlights them in a way that just feels real. It doesn't feel Like this Pokemon just feels sort of real in this image. I don't explain it, but just a really gorgeous card. Got a little bit looks like something out of Hyrule too. Like this could definitely be in a Legend of Zelda game. This particular Pokemon dragon. Next up, we have the Articuno illustration rare. I've said this a million times. So if you read my articles, I'll probably sound like a broken record, but there's sort of a trend in contemporary Pokemon sets to lean heavily into mostly newer Pokemon or a collection of different kinds of Pokemon, but while still including a super nostalgic pick. Most of these contemporary sets have them, and in this set we have an illustration rare of Articuno. So Articuno is definitely a fan favorite. It's a Pokemon we've had since the beginning of Pokemon, and I think this is definitely one of, if not the most beautiful Articuno card I have seen. This card's certainly going to be worth a ton of money. It will not be worth probably as much as like your most desirable SIR, because it's not an SIR, it's an IR, but as we've seen in the past, really desirable IRs or illustration rares can make it up there very high in value. So those are my top picks for the most expensive and top chase cards from the set. I'll also link to my guide on my market guide for what you can expect for this upcoming set. It's a huge driver for people, obviously, are those chase cards. It's a big part of the fun is trying to find these chase cards out in the wild the way you try to find Pokemon out in the wild when you're hunting for Pokemon in the games or on your phone with Pokemon Go. It just brings back a lot of that excitement of what it was like to be a kid and pull open a super rare Charizard card or whatever that rare card was that you found. So Journey Together, all in all, from a play standpoint, from a collectability standpoint, it just looks like a fabulous set. This looks like the best set that we've had in a while. From my perspective, this is a better set than Surging Sparks. It has more for players. It's a more enticing mechanics to try out, and I think that trainer tie-in makes it one of the more exciting sets that we've had in a while. So get your hands on these products. If you're going to get your hands on them, click on one of my links first, because then my site gets some of the commission from you purchasing via TCG Player. So whatever, totally appreciate it if you do click on one of our links first. There will be plenty of ways to do that in the show notes, so just check those out. And thank you so much for joining for this Pokemon focused Journey Together preview podcast. See you next time.